If I went to Japan again, I don't think I would be bringing my S5 II or 2X if it's a full frame trip.
The GH7, if you're a filmmaker, solo filmmaker, videographer, and video is your thing, I'd go for the GH7.
Like, I'm just gonna bring the S9, my lenses, and call it a day because I'm like, whatever on the record limits, you know?
I think I said it in the video, like 90% of 95% of the things that you need a gimbal for, you don't need a gimbal now.
So in today's episode, we are going to be sitting down with Scott Edwards, who is a talented creative across the pond in England in Manchester. Now, he has an entire channel dedicated on his own YouTube channel talking about filmmaking gear, but more interestingly, in the last year, he made the full switch from Sony to Lumix. Now, he was originally shooting on the S5 and then that broke and he got the S5 II, but we're going to be jumping into the conversation on why he ended up switching to Lumix, what's been making him stick with Lumix, and what the GH7 has been doing in the camera market. So without further ado, Scott.
Hello.
How are you?
Thank you for having me on.
Scott, I'm stoked to have you actually finally join me on the podcast here on the Lumix Creators podcast. I gave you the briefest of brief kind of overview of what you do and who you are, but to my audience, can you tell them who you are, a little bit of context of what you do, and just everything about that?
Yeah, so I'm Scott. I live in England. I am from Manchester, like you just mentioned, which is home to Oasis. Manchester United Football Club is obviously very popular, and Man City. Yeah, and I've got this little YouTube channel. I work full-time as a photographer and videographer, mainly shooting, I think you call it real estate over in America. We call it like estate agency. So shooting properties, we do like multi-million-pound mansions and things like that. And it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I do YouTube on the side as well.
Now, this is kind of a quick rapid fire question that I do with all of my guests. But we'll just I'm going to ask you like 3 different questions and give me your quick answers. So the first one is, what brought you to Lumix?
Sam Holland brought me to Lumix.
Sam Holland. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that first Lumix camera that you owned?
It was the original S5.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that full switch
absolutely.
video that you did was from Sony to the S5.
Yes. Yeah.
And what is your current camera setup right now?
That I'm using right now is the S5iiX with the original XLR interface sat on top.
And what lens is on that camera?
Oh, so the 35mm 1.8.
Oh,
favorite lens.
That's probably one of my favorite prime lenses.
I use it every opportunity. I'll use the 35.
I would probably use the 35mm in my whole little YouTube set I got going on right here if it wasn't only 16 square feet.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to have enough room for it. But yeah, honestly, everything you shoot with the 35 looks amazing.
So now you were a Sony shooter for around 2 to 3 years, right?
Yes, it would have been. Yeah, 2 to 3 years. Yeah,
2 to 3 years before you made that switch, and then you ironically bought the S5, basically right when the S5 II got announced.
It was literally probably 2 months before the S5 II came out. But I was at the photography show, and we got this photography show in the UK. At the NEC in Birmingham, massive event. I don't think it's quite like the what's the big one in America?
NAB, Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's not quite the size of that. But I was there and I was walking around. I came to the Lumix stand and I saw the price of it, the original S5, and I was speaking to Sam at the time, and I was like, "Why is this so cheap?" Because it was like under $1,000. So he was like, "Honestly, any doubts you have, just go for it." So I did it. Yeah, the best decision I made.
And so your video, I believe, got released on you switching to Sony to Lumix around December 2022. When did you purchase that camera? Did you purchase that camera like a month or 2 months in advance before, or did you purchase it in December as well?
No, I'd have purchased it in December as well.
Oh, so Sam told you to get the S5, even though he might have known the S5 II was coming.
Yeah, he was fully aware of that. He'd been to Japan. He knew what was coming. But yeah, I did end up getting the S5 II a couple of months later as well. So
Right.
it
Yeah,
was,
and call it lucky or unlucky, but how did you broke your screen though, correct, on the S5, which kind of
yeah,
forced you to buy the
I was,
S5 too?
it did force me into, I was devastated. It was just after, I think it was the first day of the year, it was New Year's Day, and I went for a walk to take some photos up this hill near where I live, and it slipped off my tripod. Not, we've all done it. It's not attached on, not, and it landed on the screen, pointed down, so the screen just completely
That's
snapped.
just devastating.
Yeah.
I know. I feel
So
like I always freak out like on most other camera screens or any camera screens. Like whenever I'm moving that camera screen, I'm like, oh, I feel like I could break
I
this with
know.
just a quick snap.
Yeah, it's so easily done. It's when you're on like a shooting every single day as well with work, and you've got the screen flipped out, and it's on a gimbal or it's on a tripod, and you quickly move it. It's so easy to, yeah, just catch it.
Yeah. And I would say there's like right now on the camera market, there's really no bad camera that you can buy at all. But since switching over to Lumix, what has been kind of your thoughts on what Lumix does better in comparison to other camera brands?
I think for me, it's mainly how it works. Like I never really got to grips with how the Sony's work. The whole menu system was just all over the
It's
place.
super
As soon as
clunky.
as soon as I picked up a Lumix camera, it just felt right for me, and I instantly just found my way around it. So I knew straight away that that was the right switch to make. Because I think for me, like you say, there's no bad cameras out there at all now. We're spoiled, really, compared to where we were like what 5-10 years ago. Uh, and I think it's more now about just finding the gear that works for you. And Lumix gear works perfectly for me. It fits all of my needs. So yeah, that's why as well. And I love like vlog colors. It just everything just looks amazing.
Yeah, the vlog is definitely, I feel like, just like hands down. I don't know what Lumix has done, but like with the Vericam log footage, it looks so
It
clean. It's so easy to grade.
it's so easy to work with. Yeah.
So I guess kind of transitioning on now, you shot with the S5 II. Got the S5 IIX. You played also with the S9. Lumix now recently, within the last 2 months or so, has released the GH7, which you got your hands on to play with for a bit. Was that your first Micro Four Third camera experience?
It was, yeah. I've never used any Micro Four Thirds cameras, not even like a little point and shoot. So that is way more camera than I will ever need.
Yeah,
It's so good. Like it feels incredible in the hands, like as you pick it up. But as soon as you start using it, especially for video, I didn't get the chance to use it for photography because I didn't have it for very long. But I took it out for a shoot just with my mum's dog, and everything that I was just shooting that day just felt like it looked amazing as I was looking at it on the back of the camera. And I don't think I've had that before. Yeah, it's unreal camera.
so I guess what was those first impressions and some of the standout features that you thought were like, just like, this is insane that this camera, like $2,000, this has?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a bit dubious of because I've never used it. I've heard people talking about how good the GH6 is and the GH5, that the body design. I always thought as I looked at it, I thought I prefer the way the S5 II looks. But having used it, it feels amazing in the hands. So you can tell instantly that's for videography, filmmaking, that is if I didn't do so much photography, I would go for the GH7. But feature wise, there's too much to go into. Like it's way more than I will ever need. Like for the things I do in my YouTube channel, it is like next level. It's being able to use ARRI colors and things like that. I personally don't need it, but to have it on that camera, that's what, 2 grand?
Yeah, like
Just under 2 grand.
2200.
Yeah, it's completely nuts. And
Yeah.
I think if you were to look at the camera with similar specs, definitely in full frame, you're looking at double that from another brand.
Yeah, I know. There's like so I originally, when I started my whole video production business, I was shooting on two GH6s at the time. And then Lumix reached out. I joined the Lumix creators backstage. I started shooting with the S5 2X. Now I own two S5 2Xs. I have the GH7, G9 Mark II, S9. I have a whole shloom of Lumix cameras now. But the one thing I kept missing from the S5 2X was that, well, a couple things, was the flippy up screens, was the lock switch, the front record button as a video production. Oh my goodness.
It's one of them things that you don't think you need until you've used it.
Yes.
And then you're like, that's actually really useful. The tally lights, is like we're recording now on the S5 2X. You're using what, GH7, did you say?
GH7, yeah.
Yeah, so you can see that you're recording. I've got my screen flipped around, so I've got the red box.
Yep.
But if you were sat further away, it's quite tricky to see. The tally light, if you sat on the other side of the room, it's perfect. But yeah, like the flippy screen, just whatever you call it, the vari-angle screen.
Oh, vari-angle, that's a better name. I just keep saying flippy up, flippy out.
I like that.
It's just a fun way to say it. I just had a panic mode right now because like you're like, oh yeah, the tally lights, and I'm like, my tally light is not blinking red right now.
Oh, don't say that.
It's recording. It's recording. It's just
sure?
off for whatever reason. Yeah, I like double check. I saw my red frame. I was like, we're good. But yeah, no, there's so many features like that, like in the whole shloom of things that camera's able to do. 32-bit float, the ARRI log, everything that you mentioned. Now, something that I think we both had in common when I was kind of prepping for this was we both absolutely hate gimbals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have to use one for my job,
right?
But I hate them.
I've been
like,
trying. I've been trying to create like a mini me, like a video friend of mine who's getting more started into it. But I'm trying to make like him good at gimbals and all that stuff, so I don't have to touch it. But what was that difference that you saw between the S5 II, S5 2X, and the GH7 in terms of IBIS and stabilization?
Honestly, like when I switched from Sony going to the original S5, it already was a huge jump in terms of the IBIS system. But then you go to the GH7 and it's just next level. Like you can physically walk and not like be trying to stay steady, just walking normally, and it looks like it's on a gimbal. And then you add on stabilization on top of that, the high mode. I think I said it in the video, like 95% of the things that you need a gimbal for, you don't need a gimbal now. Unless you actually genuinely need it, like a long sweeping shot following a car, or unfortunately like I do with real estate, you don't need a gimbal. And I will go as far and away as I possibly can to not use one.
They're just clunky. Sometimes they lock up and they just freeze.
Yeah.
They randomly power off.
Yeah, it's the setup. It's trying to balance them, and you're on set and you've got to try and do it quickly. And
then you want to change lenses. You're like, oh, now I have to rebalance this whole thing again.
Yeah, and you got your client watching over your shoulder, like, come on, watching the time.
Yep. No, for sure. Now, I guess to kind of transition just a little bit more on, what reasons do you personally think that people should buy the GH7 over the S5 II or 2X? And then we'll flip it vice versa. Why would people buy the S5 II or 2X over the GH7 as well?
The GH7, if you're a filmmaker, solo filmmaker, videographer, and video is your thing, and you know what you're doing with lighting and you're comfortable with all of that, I'd go for the GH7. If you're more into photography like I am, and you want the full frame look, you want low light performance, that's when to look at the S5 II for me. So like, I'm shooting real estate, I go into some pretty dark houses if there's no big windows. You can't be carrying around lights with you and things like that. You've not got the time to do that. So the extra low light performance, the dual native ISO on the S5 2X, that is what I'd choose really.
Yeah, and I feel like almost most everyone who's been shooting on Lumix cameras and they're wanting that full frame, I think everyone is waiting for the next
Oh,
big
yeah.
full frame top dog camera.
Do you reckon that's what people were expecting in Japan?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's like
Yeah.
logically, I get why Lumix sent all of us creators to Japan, and they wanted us to talk about the S9, because if they sent this camera out to us, you know, as individually kind of where we are and what we can shoot around us, we're just going to be getting a bunch of pictures of trees and dogs and nothing that
Yeah.
cool. And I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people would actually be using the camera how it was meant to be used. Meanwhile, you send all these creators who are, you know, filmmakers. There was TikTokers there. There's a whole schloom of different people there,
Yeah.
to Japan to use the camera how it was meant to be used. Kind of makes us actually like the camera a lot more, because you're like, wait, this camera is actually really sick. I would use this perfect for travel. Like if I went to Japan again, I don't think I would be bringing my S5 II or 2X if it's a full frame trip. Like I'm just gonna bring the S9, my lenses, and call it a day, because I'm like, whatever on the record limits, you know. The only reason I haven't been using it on, like, I have used it on professional shoots lately. Um, the only
I
reason
mean,
that's been
there's
holding me
no
back is
reason why you
proxies.
can't.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
There's a client where like I don't have to deliver 4K and I can just deliver proxies. So that's the only reason I'm not being like shooting on the S9 for this one
Yeah.
project, because I'd be like, oh, I
Yeah.
would just shoot on the S9 if I could just record proxies. Um,
Yeah. It's such a capable little camera, and I still think there's a little bit of confusion about it, but I love it. I went out to Liverpool with Emily, Micro Four Thirds, last just over a week ago. I literally only took the S9. I did have the S5 iiX in my bag just for one clip, um, but I just used the S9 all day because it's so easy to just have in your hand all day and not worry about size or getting in people's faces with it for a bit of street photography. Such a But then to have the features that you get on the S5 II in that small body is nuts. It's so good.
yeah. So we're gonna put a pin on this
But
because I do have the S9 in the
yeah,
conversation towards the end of this
okay,
episode. But
yeah,
I love the S9. It saddens me, but we'll talk about that. So kind of just landing the plane
yeah.
here about the GH7. Who would you recommend this camera for? I think for personally, the person I recommend it, yeah, independent filmmakers who want all the features and they don't have a huge budget. But the next person I also recommend it for is podcasters. Now with the XLR2, 32-bit float, like this entire camera like is all you need for podcasts. And hence why I wanted to set it up and try it today. And like this, how the 32-bit audio sounds obviously depends on the mic and the placement and all of that. But who would you recommend the GH7 for?
I would completely agree with that, to be honest. Just solo filmmakers, people that I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to like a beginner solo filmmaker, someone that is comfortable with their setup. They know what they're doing with lights and how to light a scene properly. If that is you, then the GH7 is perfect. But then again, you could recommend it to like wildlife photographers because it's the same specs as a G9 too. So if you're into photography, there's huge benefits of going down the Micro Four Thirds route. So that might be something that interests you.
Now, I'm going to have one more question for you, Scott. This is going to be talking about the S9, talking about that. But before we kind of talk into that, where can people check you out online? Where do you want to send people?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is just Scott Edwards, and on Instagram, Scott Edwards YouTube. That's where you can find me.
Sweet. Well, so kind of last question, and this might take a bit of time because we're both
Okay.
probably huge enthusiasts of the S9.
Yeah.
Now, as I was kind of prepping this episode, I didn't even know that we were both in Osaka, Japan together.
I don't think we spoke, but I did see you. I think you're on the other side of the room, but I don't think we actually spoke in Japan.
So I guess if this, hopefully, if there's another Japan Lumix trip and we're both invited,
Next time, absolutely. Yeah,
we
we'll have a
we can
drink.
hang. So we can get a
Yeah,
drink.
yeah,
But kind of, I want to hear your 3 hot take opinions about the Lumix S9, and they could be
Right.
positive or negative. What are kind of your
Okay.
three? I can hit you with my first one if you want to, as you're thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Go with it.
So my first one, I said the moment you shoot on this camera, you think you want to hate it, but then you end up loving it.
Yes. I
Yeah.
get that. I get that.
Like I didn't like
Um,
it. I was like, oh, this is so different. But then like I shot on it for like an hour, and I'm like, oh, I actually love this camera so
I was
much.
I was the other way around. When I first used it, I was like, I don't like this. I don't
Right.
like
Well,
this.
no,
But
no. So
then
that's what I was. I hated it at
oh,
first.
I see. So yeah, okay, got you. Yeah, I was the same. I saw the picture that they brought up on the big screen. I was like, that looks incredible. That is exactly what I want. I just want X100V style small point and shoot camera that I can take out, everyday memory kind of shooting camera. And then I used it and I was like, in two minds about it. But then like I was like you, it grew on me. I think it's still quite a misunderstood camera.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
I think because it is so capable, there's a couple of things that slightly pull it back. No mechanical shutter, no EVF. And people have got so hung up on those two things that they think it's a dreadful camera, but it's not.
Yeah.
So like, I literally put a video out about this yesterday. And it was basically saying, like we said at the start, there's no bad camera. You can buy any camera now and go do whatever you want with it. I took the S9 to shoot cricket. It's like probably the equivalent of
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
shooting baseball. And it did a great job. It looked ridiculous when I stuck this lens on it, the Sigma 100 to 400, but it did a good job. And people are still kind of against the fact that it is so capable, but there's a couple of things that draw it back, I think.
I think that's like I was shocked by that too, because I just right out the bat being like, oh, you can't shoot any sports. And then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna try. And then I was like,
Yeah,
wait, you
yeah,
actually can.
you actually
And
can.
like
Yeah,
I think it might have been in your video. I don't know if Emily said this, but like we were in Japan. There's shuttering lights everywhere. And I don't
exactly.
remember
Emily
seeing
said it.
one
Yeah.
photo or heard any person on YouTube talk about the shuttering photo because of a lack of mechanical shutter. So I bet Lumix
Yeah.
probably knew if there's no mechanical shutter, they had to put some software type of ingenuity in this camera to
Yeah.
like counteract it, and it works.
If you are coming up against banding, then you can change your shutter speed and it's fine. It's not a big an issue as it's being made out to be. The brand new Sony whatever it is, no mechanical shutter, not heard one thing about it. No EVF, not heard one thing about it. But like, I'm still getting comments on my videos now saying don't buy this camera because of these things. Someone told me that the S9 should have cost 900 quid, which is cheaper than the ZV-E10, and
Yeah.
that's a APS-C camera.
And doesn't have IBIS. It
And no
doesn't have,
IBIS.
yeah.
it's,
I
it's
I
completely
actually,
nuts.
ironically, my number 2 was I did say the price is a little steep, but
Yeah.
I think for sale, I think this camera will sell like hotcakes if it was
Yeah.
like $12.99, which I don't know
Yeah.
if that's in US. I don't know what quid even is.
Well, um, probably about 1,000, I think. Around about 1,000.
Well, it's
Yeah.
1,500 here. What's it there?
1,500.
Okay, so it's the exact same probably.
But I don't think dollar works out at the same as a pound. So I think, I don't know if some extra is added on in pounds. Because
Yeah, ours is like
think,
14.97 and 99 cents.
yeah. But about 100 quid in dollars is about £90.
So it's pretty similar. So it's like probably that 1,300 range.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
that's where this camera sits in a better price range. And the only thing I think, like, sure, the EVF was a little bit annoying at first, but then after a while, I kind of didn't notice it anymore. But the only thing that I was like, oh, it would have been better to have if it was 30-minute record limits. And that was the only feature that I was like, oh, if there's a way to get a 30-minute record limit, I would use this camera as a YouTube camera.
I've heard you say that in one of your videos, yeah, and I would completely agree. I mean, I know why they haven't done it, because they don't want the rumours that it's overheating and things like that. But 30 minutes would make it pretty much the perfect YouTube talking head camera.
Yeah, and I even like suggested in one of my videos, which maybe Lumix would hear this, and they probably already have heard this, but where if there's some way to turn off your temperature control, so you can turn it on standard. The record limits are the exact same how they are. Shouldn't overheat theoretically. You could turn it on low, everything goes to 30 minutes. Great.
Yeah.
More likely to overheat. Or you can turn it on off. It's unlimited recording, but the chances of the camera needing to cool down and shut off for that are more likely. I think having sub capabilities, especially if you're someone that's like in a cold environment and it's like 50 degrees, which I have no idea what that is in Celsius, but
cold.
Cold.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to have really much of an issue. What's that second hot take from you?
It's the camera that if I'm just going out for a day shooting, it is the camera that I will pick up 90% of the time. I think that is a massive bonus, really, just because of size. I love the size of it. I'm not a fan of the 26mm. I've tried so
hard.
I've tried hard, but I bought the Sigma 45 2.8. That is, it just stays on it all the time. It's perfect.
And I'm hoping, theoretically, they said in late-ish, so I'm hoping within the next 2 months we should be seeing that 18 to 40.
Yeah.
That's going to be a great lens.
Which I think is similar size to the 45mm.
Yep.
Those little Sigma primes. So, yeah, to have the extra versatility and a small size would be perfect.
Nice. I think my third hot take is the hybrid zoom feature and the Lumix Lab app made photography so much fun.
I'm a bit torn about the Lumix Lab app. I like editing photos. It's one of my I love editing photos, so I'm a bit torn
well, there you go.
But the hybrid zoom's great. I mean, that Sigma 100 to 400, you get like a 1200mm zoom.
Yeah.
Nuts.
The 28 to 200 is a 624.
I don't know if we'll see that in a firmware update on the S5 too, but
hopefully.
I'd like to.
I mean, I would even be okay with it. So, because I'm not a photographer by any means. I get asked to shoot photos, and I would literally just take the Lumix S9 and call it a day.
Yeah.
And just transfer it from my phone and be like,
right now. For stuff like that, like capturing behind the scenes on a shoot, or if someone wants you to get extra photos while you're doing a video shoot, it's perfect for things like that.
Right.
Using real-time LUT. But I think for me, I'm mainly photography first. I like editing photos. I'm a bit weird like that. People hate editing photos. I really enjoy it. So
yeah. No, for sure. So what's that third and final hot take?
I think for me is, I got the black one, yeah. I think for me is the little dial on the back. And I'd love a joystick on it. So you know where the AF on button is? If that was a little joystick and the little D-pad was like it is on the S5 II, I think it'd be a lot more user-friendly. Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of buttons that like I personally felt like I needed to customize to make it work more. Like I can already half press the shutter to pull my focus, so I just made that autofocus button like pull up all my autofocus settings instead of another autofocus button.
Yeah,
like the LUT button's nice, but like I switch that to custom profiles.
Yeah. I mean, because I am massively into my photography, I use the joystick all of the time. Like when I'm shooting street photography and things like that, I'm always using the joystick. I think that's one, like I said before, it took a little bit of getting used to.
Yep.
I think that's one of the reasons, because there's just nothing there. It's a little bit of a grip. But the joystick is one thing that I do miss.
Yeah.
Because it takes some getting used to going back to the touch screen.
Yeah. I will say for myself, a bonus feature that is absolutely horrendous right now on the S9 is when you hit play on the photos on all other Lumix cameras, micro four thirds, full frame, to view your photos, you kind of just do that scroll and you can see all your photos.
It ends up zooming in. Yeah, it is really.
It just zooms in, zooms out.
Yeah, you have to use the other dial.
You have to use the other dial.
It's the usability between each camera. So
right.
It should kind of be the same.
It should be the exact same. And which is interesting. Yeah. Have you touched the raw processing feature on the S9?
No.
So the raw processing feature, I'll explain it in a second. But basically, if you click and view your photos in the raw processing, you can use the back dial to scroll through your photos left and right.
Ah.
So it makes no sense.
Can't when you're actually viewing your photos.
When you're actually viewing your photos, which makes no sense whatsoever. But basically the raw processing feature, which is such a clutch feature, and I want everyone to know what this is say you take a picture. Now for yourself, if you're editing RAWs, it's not really a big deal. But if you're editing RAW/JPEGs and your JPEGs have your baked in look or has a baked in color profile, you go to raw processing, you can change your color profile, you can change your LUTs, you can change your LUTs intensity, and then you could save it as a brand new JPEG and you can send that over to your phone. And that's like
all in camera.
All in camera.
It's so good, isn't it? Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you. That's kind of where this conversation will be wrapping up here. Any last minute things you want to say? But thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
No, thank you for having me. Honestly, this is a great little podcast. I listen to every episode. So.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for being on. Check out Scott's in the link in the description. And if you guys want to see another episode talking to another Brit, you could check out that video right here. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until the next one, guys, peace.